Every province in Cuba now faces blackouts lasting most of the day. The average state salary sits at roughly 4,000 pesos a month, about $12 at the informal exchange rate. Meanwhile, a military conglomerate called GAESA operates luxury hotels, marinas, duty-free shops, and import monopolies, generating billions in annual revenue. The question is not why Cuba's economy is failing. The question is, failing for whom?
GAESA stands for Grupo de Administración Empresarial S.A. It was founded in 1996 under the direct supervision of Raúl Castro's Ministry of the Revolutionary Armed Forces. Its original mandate was narrow: manage a handful of military-linked businesses to generate hard currency during the Special Period crisis after Soviet subsidies collapsed. By the mid-2000s, GAESA had expanded into tourism through Gaviota S.A., retail through TRD Caribe and CEMEX, real estate, import-export logistics, and financial services. Cuban economists Pavel Vidal and Omar Everleni Perez have estimated that entities linked to GAESA control between 50 and 80% of Cuba's hard currency economy. The conglomerate reports not to Cuba's civilian government but to the military command structure. Its finances are not subject to National Assembly oversight.
For nearly 2 decades, GAESA's operational leader was General Luis Alberto Rodriguez López Calleja, Raúl Castro's former son-in-law. Under his direction, GAESA became the single most powerful economic actor in Cuba. Rodriguez López Calleja oversaw the Mariel Special Development Zone, managed foreign joint ventures, and controlled the import channels through which consumer goods entered the country. He died in July 2022. His death did not decentralize GAESA's power. If anything, it consolidated it further within the military senior ranks. The conglomerate structure is designed to survive any single leader because the institution that created it, the Revolutionary Armed Forces, remains the most cohesive organization in Cuban society.
Gaviota S.A., GAESA's tourism subsidiary, operates over 30,000 hotel rooms across Cuba, roughly half the country's total capacity. Before the pandemic, Cuba received about 4.3 million tourists in 2018, generating over $2.9 billion in gross revenue. The critical detail? Tourist spending in Cuba overwhelmingly flows through GAESA-controlled channels: Gaviota hotels, Gaviota tour buses, Gaviota airport services, TRD Caribe gift shops. Even when tourists spend at ostensibly private restaurants, the imported food on the plate likely entered Cuba through a GAESA logistics company. By 2024, tourist arrivals had only partially recovered to roughly 2.6 million, but the market structure remained intact. The military's share of whatever tourism revenue exists has not decreased. The pie shrank, but GAESA's slice stayed the same proportion.
In 2019, Cuba launched MLC stores, shops where goods could only be purchased with freely convertible currency loaded onto magnetic cards. The diaspora sends money. Family members load it onto cards. They buy imported goods at MLC shops. Those shops are operated by TRD Caribe and CEMEX, both GAESA subsidiaries. Remittances to Cuba were estimated at $1.9 to $3.5 billion annually before tightened U.S. sanctions. Even reduced flows represent the island's largest source of external income after medical services exports. GAESA's retail monopoly means the military captures a significant share of every dollar the diaspora sends home. The family in Miami pays. The family in Havana eats. The military profits on the transaction. Cuba effectively operates 2 economies: the peso economy, state salaries, the libreta ration system, subsidized but scarce, serves the general population. The dollar economy, tourism, MLC stores, joint ventures, import monopolies, is controlled almost entirely by GAESA. Economists describe this as a structural dualism more extreme than most developing countries. In a typical dual economy, the modern sector eventually absorbs labor from the traditional sector. In Cuba, the military dollar sector has no incentive to absorb the peso economy. It extracts from it. State workers moonlight as taxi drivers or rent rooms to tourists, trying to cross from one economy to the other. GAESA taxes that crossing at every point.
Estimating GAESA's total accumulated reserves is inherently imprecise. The conglomerate publishes no financial statements. The $18 billion figure circulated by Cuban exile economists and some analysts draws on cumulative tourism revenues, retail margins, joint venture fees, and real estate holdings over 2 decades. Other analysts, including those at the Havana Consulting Group, place the figure lower, but still in the billions. What is not disputed? GAESA holds substantial hard currency reserves, while the Cuban Central Bank reports critically low foreign exchange availability. In 2023, Cuba defaulted on Paris Club restructured debt for the second time. The civilian state cannot pay its creditors. The military conglomerate, operating outside the state budget, faces no such constraint.
The logic that created GAESA was survival. When the Soviet Union collapsed between 1989 and 1991, Cuba lost roughly 80% of its trade virtually overnight. GDP fell by an estimated 35%. Caloric intake dropped below 1,800 calories per day. The government needed hard currency, and it needed it controlled. The military was the only institution disciplined enough to manage joint ventures with foreign capital without the corruption spiraling into political fragmentation. This is the origin story GAESA's defenders tell, and it is not wrong as far as it goes. The problem is what happened next. The emergency measure became the permanent structure. The institution built to save the revolution became the institution that profits from the revolution's inability to reform. Here is the structural trap. Any genuine economic liberalization in Cuba, allowing private enterprise to import goods directly, opening tourism to non-military operators, permitting foreign investment without military intermediaries, would reduce GAESA's revenue. The institution that would have to approve reforms is the institution that loses money from reforms. This is not unique to Cuba. Political economists call it a selectorate problem, when the group that keeps the leadership in power is the same group that benefits from the status quo. The cost of reform is regime instability. Raúl Castro built GAESA. Miguel Díaz-Canel inherited a system where the military's economic power is the guarantor of political stability. Reforming GAESA means asking the armed forces to voluntarily reduce their own wealth and influence. No military in history has done this without external pressure or internal fracture. The U.S. embargo is real, and its economic cost is significant. ECLAC has estimated cumulative damages exceeding $150 billion over 6 decades. But the embargo also serves GAESA's interests. It restricts competition. It prevents American hotel chains from entering Cuba's tourism market. It limits direct foreign investment that might bypass military intermediaries. And it provides the permanent external enemy that justifies internal control. Hardliners in both Washington and Havana benefit from the embargo's continuation. U.S. hawks get to punish a socialist government. GAESA gets a protected market. The people who pay the cost are the 11 million Cubans, caught between an embargo designed to create pressure for regime change and a military conglomerate designed to absorb that pressure and profit from it. Cuba is not the only country where the military runs a parallel economy. Egypt's military controls an estimated 25 to 40% of the national economy through companies that produce everything from cement to bottled water. Pakistan's military conglomerates, Fauji Foundation, the Army Welfare Trust, operate in fertilizer, banking, and real estate. Myanmar's military held economic dominance through UEHL and MEC before and after its 2021 coup. The pattern is consistent. Military economic power, once established, becomes self-reinforcing. The generals do not need ideology. They need revenue streams. Cuba's distinction is that GAESA's dominance coexists with an official socialist ideology that claims to oppose precisely this kind of concentrated economic power. Between October 2021 and September 2024, more than 500,000 Cubans were encountered at the U.S. southern border, a staggering figure for a country of 11 million. This is not merely a migration crisis, it is an economic pressure valve. Every person who leaves is one fewer person demanding food, electricity, employment, and political accountability from the state.
Remittances from those who leave fund the MLC stores that fund GAESA. The system has achieved something remarkable in its perversity. It has made emigration profitable for the military. The people who cannot bear the peso economy leave, enter the dollar economy abroad, and send money back through channels the military controls. GAESA does not need its population to stay. It needs them to leave and keep sending money.
Three things would have to happen simultaneously for Cuba's economic structure to change. First, the U.S. embargo would have to be lifted or substantially eased, creating competitive pressure on GAESA's monopoly. Second, the Cuban government would have to create legal frameworks for private enterprise and foreign investment that bypass military intermediaries, something Diaz-Canel's 2021 SME reforms technically allow, but GAESA's import monopolies practically prevent. Third, the revolutionary armed forces would have to accept a reduced economic role, trading revenue for legitimacy. Each condition is individually unlikely. Together, they are nearly impossible in the current configuration. This is not pessimism. It is structural analysis. The incentive structure rewards every major actor for maintaining the status quo. The most likely near-term trajectory is continued stagnation with managed decline. GAESA maintains its economic position. The civilian economy continues to deteriorate. Emigration continues to drain the working-age population. The government makes periodic small-scale reforms sufficient to attract marginal foreign investment without threatening military revenue. A second possibility, destabilization, would require either a severe internal crisis or a shift in U.S. policy significant enough to disrupt the equilibrium. The July 2021 protests showed genuine popular anger, but no institutional channel to translate it into political change. A third possibility, gradual reform from within, would require a factional split within the military or a generational transition in military leadership that produces different incentive calculations. As of March 2026, the evidence for any of these scenarios breaking the structural equilibrium remains thin.
Cuba is routinely described as a failed socialist state. This framing obscures more than it reveals. The socialist economy has indeed failed. Inflation, shortages, collapsing infrastructure, mass emigration all confirm this. But the military economy has not failed. GAESA generates hard currency revenue, maintains its import channels, operates its hotel portfolio, and captures its share of remittance flows. The state that fails is the one that has to provide for 11 million people. The conglomerate that succeeds is the one that only has to provide for itself. Cuba is not a country with an economic problem. It is two economies, one designed to fail and one designed to succeed at the other's expense. Understanding the difference is where the real analysis begins.